YouTube. So today I'd like to talk to you about the cosine ratio. So I've decided to split trigonometry into three separate videos, one about sine, one about cosine, one about tangent. These are the three basic ratios you're going to learn when you start trigonometry. So remember, trigono is triangles and metry is the measure of. So trigonometry is the art of measuring triangles, and the cosine ratio is a very, very useful feature for that. Now this applies in right angle triangles, so you need to be in a right angle scenario. And when you're in a right angle scenario, you have four ratios which you can use: cosine, sine, tangent, and well, the last one isn't a ratio, four formulas I should say. The last one is Pythagoras theorem. So if you're in a right angle triangle, put your right angle brain on, and right angle brain is cosine, sine, tangent, Pythagoras theorem. These are the four things you need to know. Okay, so cosine is the ratio of the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. Now, the adjacent side to what? And what does adjacent mean? Well, adjacent in English means next to. So if I'm thinking about this angle alpha here, here's my right angle, this side here is always going to be the hypotenuse. It's always the longest side. So the hypotenuse is not the adjacent side, and it is not the opposite side. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. So this 10 here is disqualified from being either the adjacent or the opposite side. This is always going to be the hypotenuse. How do you identify the hypotenuse? It's opposite the right angle. So if you have a right angle, the biggest side is opposite the right angle. So we're interested in the adjacent side, so touching the angle. So the adjacent side here is 9. It's the side touching the angle, not 10. 10 is the hypotenuse. The adjacent side here is 1, not 10. 10 is the hypotenuse. And the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So in this case, cosine of alpha is 1 over 10. So 1 divided by 10. In this case, cosine of alpha is 9 over 10, which is 0.9. So what does that tell you? Well, trigonometry is very smart in a lot of ways. You're able to try and understand what type of angle you have based on the ratios of certain sides divided by certain sides. And I always find it easier to try and understand trigonometry as percentages. So in this case, you see that my angle is super wide, right? And my adjacent side is tiny relative to the hypotenuse. Then the ratio 1 to 10. So anytime you have like an adjacent side which is 10 times smaller than the hypotenuse, you're going to have a super wide angle. So when the cosine is 0.1, expect to see a very big angle. So in this case, the cosine means that the adjacent side is 10% of the hypotenuse. So the angle is quite large. Here the cosine is 0.9, which means the adjacent side is 90% of the hypotenuse. And so when the adjacent side is 90% of the hypotenuse, the angle is really small. It seems quite narrow. Well, that makes sense because this is quite long and it's a large portion of the hypotenuse, which means that they're going to be very close to each other. So whenever you get a very big cosine, which is close to 1, the angle should be really small. But whenever you get a really small cosine, which is close to 0, so cosine is going to fluctuate between 0 and 1, then the angle should be really big. And that makes a lot of sense. So think about cosine as a percentage against the hypotenuse, as a percentage of the adjacent side. And then that will make your life a lot easier. Now, if you've done your trigonometry properly in whatever triangle situation that you're looking at, you can go with your calculator from the angle to the ratio by pressing the cosine key. And you can go from the ratio back to the angle by pressing the cos to the -1 key. So these are the two ways that you can go. So if you have a ratio, like you know that the cosine is 0.1 and you'd like to know what this angle is, well, you type in your calculator inverse cosine 0.1, and then you'll know what angle you actually have. Or if you have a ratio which is 0.9, you do inverse cosine 0.9 and you'll know what the angle was. If on the other hand you have an angle like 60 degrees and you'd like to know what cosine ratio that should be, you do cosine 60 and then your calculator will tell you cosine 60 is a certain percentage, and you can use that to try and find some sides. If you already have the angle, typically we give you two sides and one angle, and you're missing something, like maybe you get two sides and you're missing the angle. Maybe you get the angle and one side and you're missing the other side. We give you three components and usually one of the three components is missing. And those are the kind of trigonometry questions you're going to get throughout your schooling years. Okay, well, I hope this was useful to you. Now I've decided to make this a tradition to have a terribly bad joke at the end of every class. So here it is. I hope you didn't cringe, not allowed. Maths jokes are the best, right? Okay, so if this was useful to you, make sure you follow us on Instagram at MathemagicMD. And if you'd like to find us, you can find us on YouTube, on this YouTube channel, of course. Please subscribe and make sure that you support us by liking and viewing the videos. Make sure that you do some exercises to practice so that you understand the concepts that I'm explaining in the videos. In terms of other videos related to trigonometry, I'll do my best to upload some related to scalene trigonometry as well, because this is all about right angle trigonometry. And in the meantime, make sure that you don't get scared when you see the word trigonometry, because it just means the measure of triangles. And we need triangles because all the shapes in the universe in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions are made of triangles, or can be broken down into triangles. Yes, even circles. Okay, have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.